History books don't tell her story. They might mention famous black women activists, artists, leaders, but they don't talk about your grandmother, the one who worked as a domestic in white homes for 40 years just to put food on the table. They don't talk about how she raised 5 children of her own, and then raised half her grandchildren too when life got hard for their parents. They don't mention how she made miracles with chicken and rice, how she could stretch a dollar until it screamed, how she kept everyone clothed and fed on next to nothing. History doesn't record her prayers or her wisdom or her strength, but everyone in your family knows. Everyone who grew up in a black household in the 1970s knows exactly what their grandmother meant to the family. She was the one you could count on when everything else fell apart. She was the one whose house was always open, whose table always had room for one more, whose prayers covered everyone. Black grandmothers were the unsung heroes of their families and their communities, doing the impossible work of holding everything together with limited resources, immense challenges, and a strength that seemed to have no bottom. Today, we're finally telling their story, examining what black grandmothers did, how they did it, what they sacrificed, and why their role was absolutely essential to black family survival and success. Black grandmothers in the 1970s were the anchors of their families in the most literal sense. When adult children struggled, lost jobs, went through divorces, battled addiction, got incarcerated, faced mental health crises, black grandmothers stepped in. They took in grandchildren, sometimes raising entire second families while still working full-time themselves. This wasn't occasional babysitting. This was full custody, full responsibility, full parenting all over again when they should have been resting after raising their own children. Many black grandmothers had 3 or even for generations, living under their roofs at various points, their adult children who needed temporary help, their grandchildren being raised full-time, sometimes even great-grandchildren, and somehow, on fixed incomes or modest wages from domestic work or factory jobs or hospital cleaning. These black women managed to feed everyone, clothe everyone, keep the lights on, and maintain order and dignity in households that were bursting at the seams. They did this without complaint, or at least without complaint that reached the children. They did it because family was family, because you didn't turn your back on your own, because this is what black women had always done, held the family together no matter what it took. The financial magic that black grandmothers performed daily would be impossible to replicate. Today, they were feeding 6, 7, 8 people on grocery budgets that wouldn't feed the people now. They did this through incredible resourcefulness and skill. Black grandmothers knew how to make cheap cuts of meat tender and delicious. They knew how to stretch meals by adding beans, rice, potatoes. They knew which vegetables were cheapest and most filling. They knew how to use every part of the chicken, how to make stock from bones, how to turn leftovers into completely new meals. Nothing was wasted in a black grandmother's kitchen. Stale bread became bread pudding. Leftover greens went into soup. Every jar was scraped clean. Every bit of food was used. And somehow, despite these limitations, the food was incredible. Black grandmothers could make magic with humble ingredients: neck bones and beans, chicken backs and rice, ham hocks and collards. Food that cost almost nothing but tasted like love and filled your stomach, and somehow felt like abundance even when resources were scarce. This wasn't just cooking, it was alchemy. Creativity born of necessity, love expressed through feeding people even when there wasn't enough to go around. Black grandmothers were also the family bankers before that term existed. When someone needed money for rent, for utilities, for unexpected expenses, they went to grandmother. She might not have had much, but she had something tucked away, money saved carefully from her wages, squirreled away in coffee cans or drawers or hidden spots throughout the house. She kept track of who owed what, who needed help, how to distribute limited resources fairly. She loaned money to family members interest-free, often never expecting full repayment. She covered emergencies. She made sure children had school supplies and decent clothes and lunch money. She did this while also paying her own bills, maintaining her own household, and somehow always having a little something saved for the next crisis. This financial management on a poverty-level income demonstrated skills that would put professional accountants to shame. Black grandmothers understood cash flow, budgeting, priorities, and sacrifice in ways that kept families afloat when one unexpected expense could sink everyone. The emotional labor that black grandmothers performed was nothing short of extraordinary. They were the heart of the family, the counselors everyone turned to with their problems, heartbreaks, conflicts, and confusions. Black grandmothers were masters of mediation, resolving disputes. Between siblings, offering timeless advice on relationships and raising children, they listened without judgment and somehow always knew just what to say. Their wisdom felt bottomless, earned through long lives filled with trials and survival. When a marriage was on the rocks, the couple went to grandmother. When a teenager was acting out, parents brought them to grandmother. When someone was veering off track, grandmother would sit them down and deliver the unvarnished truth, but always with a loving hand. They had this incredible ability to be firm and loving at the same time, to correct you without crushing your spirit. They held you to high standards while showering you with grace. They expected you to do better because they truly believed you could, and that belief made you want to live up to their hopes. Their approval was the ultimate prize, and their disappointment stung more than any punishment. Above all, their love was the unwavering foundation on which everyone stood. Black grandmothers were also the spiritual pillars of their families. They prayed over everything and everyone. Before a meal, before a trip, before a new school year, before a surgery, before a job interview, before a birth, you could be sure a black grandmother was praying. They prayed for protection over their children and grandchildren. They prayed for guidance, for wisdom, for strength through every crisis and hardship. Many of them kept actual prayer lists, written reminders of family members and their specific needs. And they went through those lists daily. Their faith wasn't some abstract idea. It was practical, active, and powerful. Black grandmothers believed with every fiber of their being that prayer worked, that God heard them, and that their intervention made a real difference. And you know what? Their families believed it too. Everyone wanted to be on grandmother's prayer list. It was like a spiritual insurance policy. You just felt safer knowing she was talking to God on your behalf. Her faith was contagious. Her prayers felt like they had a direct line, and her relationship with God seemed so solid that it anchored everyone else's more uncertain faith. In a crisis, the first thing you'd hear is, "We need to call grandmother and ask her to pray." Her prayers carried a special weight, a power built on decades of faith through impossible circumstances. And let's not forget, black grandmothers were the memory keepers, the living historians of the family. They remembered everyone who married whom, when each person was born, how someone passed, and which child favored which ancestor. They were the keepers of the photo albums and the tellers of the stories. They were the bridge that connected younger generations to family members they'd never met, to a history they hadn't lived, to roots that ran deep into the soil of the past. Black grandmothers passed down family recipes, not just as instructions, but with the stories of where they came from. They explained why certain traditions were so important. They made sure the younger generation understood their lineage, what their family had survived, and the incredible strength that flowed through their veins. This oral history was absolutely vital because so much of black history was intentionally left unwritten, undocumented, or erased. It was the black grandmothers who preserved what would otherwise be lost: the names, the stories, the connections, the legacy. They ensured their grandchildren knew they came from somewhere, from a line of people who had survived, persisted, and built lives against all odds, despite everything America tried to do to stop them. The work ethic of black grandmothers was legendary and often heartbreaking. Many worked physically demanding jobs well into their 60s and 70s because they simply couldn't afford to retire. They cleaned houses, cooked in large kitchens, worked in hospitals or nursing homes, and did laundry and ironing for white families. They worked through arthritis, bad backs, and sheer exhaustion. They had to. People depended on them. Stopping meant the family would suffer. These women would rise before dawn to go to work, come home bone-tired, and still cook a full dinner for a house full of people. They worked on Saturdays to earn extra money. They took on side jobs sewing, ironing, watching other people's children just to make ends meet. And they did all this without the recognition or support they so deeply deserved. White employers often paid them poverty wages. The social systems in place offered minimal help, and their bodies paid the ultimate price: knees that gave out, backs that ached constantly, hands gnarled from decades of hard labor. But they kept going, because that's what black grandmothers did. They persisted. Beyond the physical labor, black grandmothers provided a sanctuary, a haven from the racism that black children and adults desperately needed to escape. In their homes, family members could finally rest from the constant state of high alert required in white spaces. In grandmother's house, black children could be loud, playful, and completely themselves without the burden of representing their entire race. Adults can speak freely, vent their frustrations, and be vulnerable. A black grandmother's home was a space where blackness wasn't under a microscope, where you didn't have to code switch or perform respectability. It was a place where you could just be. This emotional and psychological safety was crucial for mental health and survival. Black grandmothers understood, without needing to be told, what their children and grandchildren faced out in the world. They had faced it themselves for decades, so they intentionally created these spaces of refuge, homes where Black people could lower their guards, take a deep breath, and be loved without conditions or judgment. This sanctuary was just as vital as the food, the financial help, and all the other tangible support they provided. It was the emotional bedrock of the family. Let's talk about the discipline of a Black grandmother. It was legendary. They did not play. They had rules, and they expected those rules to be followed, no questions asked. Black grandmothers could stop you in your tracks with just a look, that very specific expression. That said both "I am disappointed" and "you better try me." They could correct you with just a few words, cutting right through any excuse and demanding that you do better. And yes, if necessary, they could administer physical discipline that nobody questioned. Why? Because everyone understood it came from a place of love and high expectations, not cruelty. Black grandmothers demanded respect. Respect for your elders, respect for the house, and most importantly, respect for yourself. They required you to have manners, to be responsible, to put in the effort. They had no time for laziness, disrespect, or excuses. But this strictness was always paired with unwavering support. Black grandmothers held you to high standards because they genuinely believed you could meet them. They corrected you because they loved you far too much to let you fail. They pushed you because they knew the world would be even harder, and they were determined to prepare you for it. This powerful combination of tough love and fierce protection created children who understood accountability and unconditional love in equal measure. The influence of Black grandmothers extended far beyond their own front doors. They were pillars of their communities. They were the ones neighbors turned to for a cup of sugar or a full meal. They were the ones friends called during a crisis. They were the ones church members sought out when they were in trouble. Black grandmothers would stretch their already limited resources to help people who weren't even family. They fed neighborhood kids whose parents were struggling to make ends meet. They took in children who had nowhere else to go. They were the heart of community organizing. Often through their churches, they served as unofficial social workers, connecting people with resources and advocating for families navigating systems that were often designed to work against them. All of this community caregiving was on top of everything they were already doing for their own families. But they understood a fundamental truth. Black people survive through collective care. We survive by looking out for each other, by refusing to let anyone fall through the cracks, especially when society tries to push us down. The sacrifices Black grandmothers made were immense, and so often went unacknowledged. They sacrificed their bodies, enduring decades of physical labor. They sacrificed their rest, their retirement, to raise another generation of children. They sacrificed their own dreams, their own desires, to meet the needs of their family. How many Black grandmothers never got to travel the world, never got to pursue a hobby or an interest, never got to just be carefree for a day? They couldn't, because they were always responsible for someone. They were always needed. They were always holding it all together. They consistently put themselves last. They ate only after everyone else was fed. They bought things for others before ever buying something for themselves. They worked even when they were sick because they couldn't afford to miss a single day's wages. These sacrifices were made quietly, without complaint, without ever expecting a thank you. But they added up, creating lives of service that were both breathtakingly beautiful and deeply heartbreaking. Black grandmothers gave everything they had, and when that wasn't enough, they somehow found a little more to give. The love of a Black grandmother was different. It was a force of nature, fiercer, more protective, and more unconditional than any other kind of love. It was a love that had weathered loss, disappointment, and unimaginable hardship, and yet it remained unbreakable. Black grandmothers loved their grandchildren with an intensity that felt almost spiritual. In their grandchildren, they saw a new chance, a new hope, a chance to provide what they couldn't provide for their own children, a hope for a brighter, better future. They spoiled you whenever they could afford to, saving special treats just for you, cooking your favorite meal, and offering a level of grace and understanding they might not have had when they were raising their own kids. But that love was also demanding. They expected you to be respectful. They expected you to work hard. They expected you to make something of yourself and honor the sacrifices that were made for you. This love was a paradox. It was demanding, yet it was the most secure thing in your world. You knew, without a single doubt, that your black grandmother loved you. That love was the bedrock of your existence. It was the one thing you could always count on, the force that held everything together when the world around you was falling apart. Today, the world is slowly starting to recognize the monumental role that black grandmothers have played, but it's still so undervalued. Their contributions are often invisible in the broader conversations about the black family. People talk about the black family structure as if it's broken or deficient, but they completely ignore the fact that black grandmothers have been the glue, holding our families together for generations. They did this in the face of systemic racism, economic oppression, and every other barrier imaginable. Pundits and politicians don't acknowledge the incredible, superhuman strength required to do what black grandmothers did and what so many continue to do. They don't see the resourcefulness, the wisdom, the sacrifice, the bottomless well of love. But we know, we, black people, know, every single one of us who was blessed to have a grandmother like this knows exactly what she meant, what she did, and what she gave. And that knowledge, that legacy, needs to be preserved, honored, and passed down from one generation to the next. Black grandmothers deserve to have their stories told. Their sacrifices deserve to be acknowledged. Their strength deserves to be celebrated. They were the unsung heroes who held our world together. They were the foundation upon which we stand. They were the reason black families survived and thrived against all odds. They deserve to be remembered, not just within the quiet corners of our families, but in the grand, sweeping story of black resilience and excellence in America.